Welcome to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. This episode is part of our Indies Introduced series, where we spotlight debut authors handpicked by booksellers from around the country. In each episode, a bookseller from the Indies Introduced panel will interview the author of a debut title featured in our program.
Hi there, my name is Lisa Swayze. I'm with Buffalo Street Books in Ithaca, New York, and I was pleased to be on the Indies Introduced panel that chose Tom's book as one of our selections earlier this year. Tom Newlands is a multiply neurodivergent Scottish writer. He's a recipient of the London Writers' Award for Literary Fiction, a Creative Future Writers' Award, and a Creative Future TLC Next Up Award. He was one of 11 writers selected for New Writing North's A Writing Chance, and in 2022 was a featured writer at the Scottish Mental Health Arts Festival. He now lives in London, and we're here today to talk about his debut novel, Only Here, Only Now. Welcome.
Hey, Lisa, nice to speak to you.
Thanks so much for being here. I have to say, we all really enjoyed this book on the panel. We had a lot of conversations about it. One of the first things that stood out for me about Only Here, Only Now was its setting. Your portrayal of Fife is terribly eloquent. It brought to life a place and a time I would never have experienced otherwise. And something I read, you talked about the personality of place. Can you tell us about that idea and how it plays into Only Here, Only Now?
Sure, yeah. I'm really glad you said that, because it was one of the things that I really wanted to do when I set out to write the book. I think often when we think of immersion in a novel, we think of cozy places or fancy places or nice surroundings. But I was really determined to take this very rough and ready town, or series of towns that were down on their luck a little bit in the 1990s, as you described. This time in Scotland, it wasn't a particularly good time. And I really wanted to immerse the reader in the personality of the place, as you say, both through the descriptive details, but through the characters as well, and how the characters embody the place as well. They've grown up there, and they're part of the scenery almost as well. And the novel was written in lockdown. I live in London now, but I'm from Scotland, and I think, like a lot of people, I felt quite dislocated during lockdown. I couldn't go and see my friends and family in Scotland. And, when I was writing the novel, I didn't particularly feel homesick. But on reflection, when I read it back now and I look back at what I was doing, I think there was a lot of kind of homesickness in it. I was imagining places that I knew, and I was getting right into the detail of describing them because I couldn't visit them at the time.
Mm-hmm. And it was a comfort to do that in some way.
It absolutely was. Yeah, it really was. And as I say, that wasn't obvious to me as I was writing,
mm-hmm.
but certainly when I reflect on it, it does seem that was what was going on.
Yeah, that makes sense. I want to talk about, speaking of characters, your main character, Cora Mowat. One of my colleagues on the panel, Steve Wonsky from Charter Books, said in a review of her that Cora's singular voice and humor are absolutely unforgettable. She goes through so much and does some truly wrong things, but we never look down on her. Where did Cora come from? How did you develop such a real character?
Yeah, there was a lot of different things went into it. Obviously, there's a little bit of myself. There's a little bit of people that I knew growing up. A lot of it was an opportunity to be linguistically playful and just to put some great language and to have some great one-liners in there as well. So there was that. But about 10 years ago, I went to a wedding. It was a friend of mine that I grew up with in Scotland, and he's living in London, down in London now as well. And a lot of his cousins came down to the wedding, and it was the first time that I'd been around teenagers from my own area for decades. And so they were all going to the school that I had been to, and I was so excited to find out, what was going on, what the teachers, the place, what it was like, and I couldn't believe how down they were about it. They didn't want to talk about it at all. They hated the place, they hated the town, they hated their school, and they were just full of questions from me about London. And at that point, I was feeling a little bit tired of London, and I was so desperate to get some news from home, and yet they were totally focused on things happening elsewhere.
Right.
And that really stuck in my head, that idea of wanting to escape And that idea of the grass being greener somewhere else. I thought, take that and put it into a character, somebody who has that complete restlessness and who just is completely dissatisfied with everything around them. And that was really the birth of the Cora Mount idea.
Yeah, yeah. I think I really related to her, having been that teenager myself from my own small town. Cora is a character with undiagnosed ADHD that has a major impact on her young life. Can you talk to us about why you wanted to create a character with ADHD and, what you were hoping to achieve in doing that?
Sure, yeah. I have ADHD myself. I'm autistic as well. And I think in the UK, we're much further behind America and probably Central Europe as well in terms of our, understanding of ADHD and our acceptance of it. And it's, in this country, it's been closely related to class for many years. And so many harmful stereotypes about ADHD grew up during the almost the period after the book, the late 90s and the 2000s. ADHD became associated with class, poor diet, broken families, all these kind of things. And I wanted to create a character who was central to all those stereotypes. And, Cora loves sweets, fizzy drinks, all the rest of it. She comes from a single parent family. I wasn't on a crusade to prove anybody wrong about anything. It was much more important to me that the character was authentic, first and foremost. But I was really keen to show something of the life and the humor and the humanity behind ADHD and so many of the good things that come with it as well. Cora's a very empathetic character. She's very quick thinking. She's got a great sense of humor, got a great heart. Yeah. And so many of the kind of impulsive things that she does. I mean, you mentioned earlier she does some things that are pretty wrong, but her impulsivity also helps her step up at times when it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, it's great. One of the beautiful things about her. I felt like some of my questions were all in the same wheelhouse, but those were the questions I have. So I think it's unusual in modern fiction to see a portrayal of a, happy working class ending. And I loved finding that in your book. Did you make that choice very deliberately? If so, why?
Yeah, it wasn't deliberate, no. I mean, the ending developed as I was writing the book. I'm relatively new to writing. This is my first novel. I hadn't really done any writing since high school. And so the process of writing the book, I was learning as I went along. It was a bit like kind of driving the train and laying the track at the same time. And so I was more than halfway through without an ending. And the ending kind of developed itself as I worked towards it. But it was important for me that there was resolution, of course, and that there was happiness in it for Cora. And there was obviously Cora's journey of self-discovery and about herself and her past and the relationships she builds. Those things were all important. But it was also important for me to reinforce that by the end of the book, this hasn't turned into a kind of, happy family middle class scenario. They're not, attending a pottery class or going off into the distance to learn about ornithology or anything. I didn't want it to resolve in that way. And so there's some scenes towards the end of the book where we know that Cora, it's still Cora. Those issues have not resolved themselves. She's found a modicum of happiness and a modicum of confidence and understanding in herself, but she is who she is right till the end of the book, and that was really important as well.
Yeah, I really appreciated that. I loved this quote where you said that in Only Here, Only Now, you wanted to write a really vivid book that could tackle some heavy subject matters with warmth and humor. And I feel like, I hope everyone's getting this from just the conversation, that you really did that in this book. It's not just Cora, but other characters like her friend Jo and her stepfather Gunnar. They're all handled with a lot of generosity. What makes it possible for you as a writer to do that, to show hard things and difficult situations, but to rarely judge your characters, to keep them fully human and even make it funny? That must have been hard to do. How did you do it?
Uh,
Yeah, thank you very much.
a lot of people have commented on that, but it does seem to have come quite naturally to me. I guess you have to love your characters, and I love all my characters, even when they're not doing the right thing.
Actually not a nonprofit.
You've got to hang out with these people as you write the book, as you promote the book, as we're doing now. It's been 4 years of thinking and talking about these characters, and so I know them pretty well, and I genuinely have affection for all of them. But I think so many writers are observers of working class culture. They're observers of criminal elements or tearaway kids, and when they put them into their book, you can see that they haven't had the experience. They haven't lived. It's not based on any lived experience, because everyone is very complex. There's no way you can lift a two-dimensional character, a two-dimensional criminal, and plop him into a story and expect a reader to buy it. And so many times you do come across caricatures, cardboard cutout type characterizations. I think the only answer I can give is that I've known these people. They're all based on people that I've known. That's all I can say about it, really.
Well, it's certainly a I want to say blessing, which is not a word I use usually, but that you do have that experience and you were able to put it down on paper for the rest of us to enjoy.
And I should say as well, I think part of it was just, as I say, being new to writing and just the relish of being able to try out descriptions on all different types of people, types of situations, different scenes. It was all new to me. And, I really wanted to approach each character with fresh eyes and really get my teeth into making them interesting and making them, descriptively interesting for the reader as well. So there's that as well.
Well, and that's like a perfect comment to end our interview, in that, it's a great argument for why we pay attention to debut authors like yourself and do things like this Indies Introduced program, where we get to read debut authors who can teach us new things. So thank you so much for that. And everyone, go read Only Here, Only Now.
Thank you so much. And, I'm overjoyed to be part of the program. It's so exciting. All my influences growing up as a writer were American. I loved American fiction. So this has been amazing for me. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to Booked, the Bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Additional educational resources can always be found on the ABA website at www.bookweb.org. Happy reading!